and you should too.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only three people you can trust in life: your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet?
What is this? It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning and welcome to Sunday with Michael Portillo. December is here, so let's count down to Christmas with a kaleidoscope of culture, history and good debate. I'll be speaking to the family of a 21-year-old male Israeli hostage who remains in the hands of Hamas as fighting between the terror group and Israel resumes. Our politics panel this week will dissect the latest headlines. Sir Keir Starmer has paid tribute to Margaret Thatcher because she sought to drag Britain out of its stupor by setting loose our natural entrepreneurialism. Will disillusioned Tories be impressed and will left-wing Labour MPs be chuffed? How has Rishi Sunak emerged from a week in which he was accused of throwing a hissy fit with the Greek Prime Minister? And is he right to insist that Britain is leading the world in climate action at the COP summit in Dubai? After which we have a remarkable film from Julian Lloyd-Webber, who has met the classical pianist Nicholas McCarthy. Many of the talented musicians interviewed by Julian over the past year have had to overcome challenges in their careers, but none quite as significant as Nicholas, who was born without a right hand. He's pioneered a repertoire of piano music for left hand only. Stefan Kyriazis will review two of the most highly anticipated theatre productions of the season, including Ralph Fiennes' portrayal of Macbeth. Later in the programme, we'll return to the Elgin marbles to ask a panel of four academics, where is the proper home for the ancient sculptures? At the programme's end, I'll be joined by wine critic Henry Jeffries to recommend the best English wines for Christmas. All of that to come after your headlines with Aaron Armstrong.
Very good morning to you. It's a minute past 11 here in the GB newsroom. Thousands of people in Cumbria could be without power until late tonight after heavy snow. Electricity North West says teams are struggling to reach sections of the damaged network. Around 2,500 customers will be affected. Emergency services have also been working to help people trapped in their cars overnight. A large number of vehicles were abandoned on the M6. Weather warnings for snow and ice remain in place for many parts of the UK. Senior meteorologist Jim Dale says milder conditions, though, are on the way over the coming days, but could lead to floods.
Give or take that area saw about a foot of snow, level snow. That if you melt that snow, which is what meteorologists do, it equates to an inch. Tomorrow we got another system coming in, another system which has got low pressure attached to it. It's quite a tight thing, so there'll be wind, but also heavyweight rain as well. Now, all that snow down, and not just Monday, but on Wednesday as well, quite heavyweight rain. So all this snow and the rain attached to it that's coming, I think we might be looking at floods at midweek again.
An extra £15 million will reportedly be given to Rwanda to take migrants who arrive in the UK illegally. That's on top of the £140 million already received. The Sunday Times says the additional funds aim to secure a treaty so the East African country also takes asylum seekers who cross the channel in small boats. It's understood Foreign Secretary James Cleverly will fly to Kigali in the coming days to seal the agreement. 519 people have crossed the channel in 11 small boats yesterday. A man's died and 2 people have been injured after a knife and hammer attack in central Paris. It happened as tourists gathered near the Eiffel Tower last night. Officials have confirmed the man who died was German. A 26-year-old French national known to security services has been arrested. The UK will carry out surveillance flights over the Middle East to find hostages held by Hamas. More than 130 people are still being held captive in Gaza, where fighting's resumed following a week-long truce. The Ministry of Defence says the unarmed flights will not have a combat role. Meanwhile, Israel continues to carry out intense airstrikes in southern Gaza. The Hamas-run health ministry says 7 Palestinians were killed and several others injured during a raid on Rafah city. The United States is calling on Israel to avoid further harm to civilians in its fight against Hamas. The UK will give £100 million to vulnerable countries most affected by climate change. It will provide nations with early warning systems for extreme weather and will help tackle food and water shortages and a rise in infectious diseases. The government says global warming pushes 26 million people into poverty every year. International Development Minister Andrew Mitchell will announce the plans at the COP28 climate summit in Dubai later. And former Prime Minister Liz Truss is set to propose a law banning biological males from single-sex spaces. Ms Truss is also looking to prevent children from attempting to change their gender. The bill would also ban transgender women from accessing female toilets and changing rooms. It's due to be presented to the Commons on Wednesday. More travel chaos today as train drivers stage another day of strikes. ASLEF union members are walking out in a dispute over pay. Great Northern, Thameslink and Avanti West Coast trains have been cancelled. Chiltern Railways and West Midlands railway services are also affected. We're live on TV, on digital radio and on your smart speaker too. Now it is back to Michael.
Thank you, Aaron Armstrong. The temporary ceasefire between Israel and Hamas ended on Friday. While it lasted, 105 civilian hostages were released by Hamas, and Israel set free 210 Palestinian prisoners. Rather fewer than half of those abducted on the 7th of October have been returned home. One of those not returned is Almog Meir Jan. He's a 21-year-old man abducted from the Nova Music Festival. I'm joined from Israel by his mother, Orit Meir, and his uncle, Aviram Meir. Hello to you both. Orit, first of all, may I ask, have you had any news whatsoever of your son since the 7th of October?
Since the 7th of October, we have only the video clip that the Hamas published, that we saw him lying on the floor with the other 4 young guys that he didn't know before. That they were tied, were beaten, and he was lying and he covered his face with his hands, and he was frightened. That's what we have. Only this video.
And there have been 57 days passed.
How did you feel? Let me ask Orit first. How did you feel when the ceasefire broke down? What impact did that have upon you?
Well, I prefer not to answer this question.
I understood. Tell me, where are your hopes focused? Let me ask Aviram. Where are your hopes focused? Are your hopes focused on the possibility of new negotiations and the possibility of another ceasefire?
It's complicated. Let's say it's complicated. As we understand it, the pressure of the military operation is working. So we hope that there will be another round of negotiation after a while of military pressure.
Orit, were you able, despite your own terrible personal situation, were you able to feel the joy when you saw some of the hostages released during the recent ceasefire?
First of all, I'm happy for them and for the families. I'm waiting for this moment too. It's hard. It's hard for me to see it. I'm jealous. But I believe that my time will come too, and we will see him again, alive.
And Aviram, may I ask you, how are you able to best support Orit during this time, and what kind of support are you receiving, either from official sources or from other family and friends?
First of all, we have a military representative who's contacting us every day and giving us a full support, even with governmental officers, if we need something. Second, we are sitting now in the hostages family forum in Tel Aviv, and they're giving us full support for all our needs, mental and physical and everything we need.
Social.
And here we meet with lots of the other families, hostages families, and we all the time in contact. And we have become a big family. We didn't pick this family, but we have a new family, and we all the time in contact, we all the time talking, we all the time thinking together what to do. And this is what supports us.
Now we have the city hall. I'm living in Or Yehuda city, so they support us too. They give us all we need, social, even fixing things at home, lots of things. They support us very much.
I can't tell you how grateful we are to you for appearing on the programme this morning. Our thoughts are very much with you, and we hope for a very good outcome as soon as may possibly be. Thank you very much to Orit and Aviram Meir. That interview was facilitated.
Thank you very much, Michael.
That was facilitated by the Miriam Institute, which is supporting Orit and Aviram, and its website is www.miriaminstitute.org. Quotes: Margaret Thatcher sought to drag Britain out of its stupor by setting loose our natural entrepreneurialism. Tony Blair reimagined a stale, outdated Labour Party into one that could seize the optimism of the 1990s, end of quote. Thus wrote Sir Keir Starmer in today's Sunday Telegraph. Who is impressed and who is riled? Meanwhile, the Prime Minister provoked some bemusement and ridicule by cancelling a meeting with his Greek counterpart over a long-standing dispute over the Elgin marbles. The Prime Minister sought to move attention away with his speech at the COP28 summit in Dubai. He said that Britain is leading the world in decarbonisation, but that the government cannot enforce restrictions on fossil fuels without the assent of the public. To discuss those developments, Tories, Lib Dems and Labour are represented. I have with me the former aide to Michael Gove, Charlie Rowley, Labour advisor Paul Richards, and a former press secretary to Paddy Ashdown, Joe Phillips. Let me start with you, Paul. Are you impressed by what Keir has said about Margaret Thatcher and indeed about Tony Blair?
I am impressed in the sense that he is putting his tanks all over the Tory lawn. He's annoyed all of the right people this morning with this interview in the Telegraph, or this piece in the Telegraph. And it's just classic New Labour playbook, isn't it? You know, reach deep into your opponent's territory, try and turn those switches into Labour voters, and leave no stone unturned in trying to win. So, yes, why not?
And is there any collateral damage in the sense of left-wing Labour MPs who will be very upset by this, presumably.
Well, they're already upset, aren't they? Let's face it. So he's not sort of disappointed anyone with this, because those people in the campaign group and on the left of the Labour Party are already offside. They're already trying to tear him down and do him down at every opportunity. Some of them have left the Labour Party as well, the non-MP. So he knows that is a tiny part of the electorate, as we discovered in 2019. But the bigger prize is the centre ground, and that's where he's pitching very directly. So good for him.
Joe, the bigger prize is the centre ground, which is broadly where you are meant to be. What was your pitch to Tory voters? I mean, I can see why they might be impressed by a man who's talking about Margaret Thatcher, but what's your pitch?
I think, historically, Tory voters are less likely to go straight from the Conservatives to Labour. So Lib Dems are often seen as the sort of the middle route. It's the sort of, it's the gateway to hard drugs of the Labour Party, if you like. And I think it depends very much on the area. Rural areas, the Lib Dems traditionally do well on. I think what's happened, and I have to say that I completely agree with Paul. I mean, I think Keir Starmer is absolutely right to talk about Margaret Thatcher and Tony Blair and also Clement Attlee. And I've always said, in fact, I might have said it to you last time we were on this programme, that Keir Starmer is the Clement Attlee compared to the Poundland Churchill we had of Boris Johnson. And Clement Attlee is widely regarded by historians and political chroniclers as the best Prime Minister for rebuilding the country. What he needs to do from making that pitch is to then say, as Margaret Thatcher had a vision and Tony Blair had a vision and Attlee had a vision, what is his vision? Because that's the bit that I think people are waiting for.
Keir Starmer is also willing to talk about immigration. I can't imagine the Lib Dems talking about that.
Well, the Lib Dems do talk about immigration, but I think the trouble is that the whole debate about immigration has become so toxic, not helped by the outgoing or outgone Home Secretary Suella Braverman and various factions on the Tory right and a lot of social media. And we know perfectly well from the figures that came out a couple of weeks ago that the great majority of the increase in legal migration is people who are coming to work here. And they're coming to work here to do jobs that we can't fill.
But you're rather proving my point, that the one thing the Lib Dems won't talk about to prospective voters who might switch from Tory is that you're going to reduce immigration.
Well, I think
you're simply explaining it.
But you can say we want to reduce it, but you can't just say, all right, we're going to stop giving visas to people who are coming to do social and healthcare work. You've got to have a proper conversation and say, right, how are we going to do that? We can only do that if we can train up domestic people and offer them good salaries and a career pathway if we don't need people from outside.
Let's bring in Charlie Rowley. Are you worried that Keir Starmer is talking about Margaret Thatcher? Do you not think that to a lot of disillusioned Tory voters this might be quite impressive?
I think so. I mean, to be in a position where Sir Keir feels able to now praise Margaret Thatcher and appeal to those centre, maybe Tory voters, is worrying if you're a Conservative, the fact that he feels confident enough to do that. It is sort of Boris Johnson-esque, saying that, people in the Red Wall, in particularly the north of England, people that voted for Brexit, for example, they lent their vote to the Conservatives. It's sort of, trying to just say, look, you've been a community that might be undervalued and overlooked for far too long under Labour. Under the Conservatives, we're going to unite and level up the country, put your trust in us just this once. And Keir Starmer now seems to be in that sort of territory where he's saying to the Tories, look, you've had 13 years where you might criticise the economy, you might criticise immigration, you might criticise crime, and so now is the chance, having changed the Labour Party, and that's what was also in Keir's piece in the Telegraph, he's changed the Labour Party post-Corbyn, he will now change the country, so you can lend me your vote as a Conservative.
But let me quote Boris Johnson in a different way. Boris wrote a biography of Churchill. Unfortunately, it didn't make him into Winston Churchill. Keir Starmer can quote Margaret Thatcher. It doesn't make him into Margaret Thatcher.
Quite. And you see in some of the performances at PMQs, it's never been quite the standard of Margaret Thatcher or Tony Blair or even David Cameron to an extent, who are very good orators.
But maybe
I'm going to stick with Charlie just for a minute because I'm going to move the subject on. Charlie, I put it to you that Rishi Sunak made a diplomatic howler over the Elgin marbles, and the reason he did it was he had to detract attention from the horrific immigration figures. Discuss.
I don't think it was as premeditated as that, if I can put it that way.
You're not denying it was a howler, though?
I think it was an attempt where Rishi Sunak is saying to the public, and I think, look, broadly, it's an important topic, but are the public talking about the Elgin marbles? No, they're not. I don't think that, in all the issues that are going on, whether it's the cost of living, whether it's getting an NHS appointment, whether it's getting ready for Christmas, whether you can actually have a good family Christmas this year, I think the Elgin marbles is a by the by. And so for Rishi to be able to, if he was able to say, look, this is something that diplomatically has gone wrong, but I'm taking control and I'm not going to meet the Greek Prime Minister because we had an agreement that we wouldn't necessarily talk about the issue in public. That's been breached. So I'm moving on. Was an attempt to demonstrate leadership, I think, and move on. But I don't think any of the public are talking about it. So I think
good try, Charlie.
Yesterday's kebab paper.
Paul, I think Charlie makes my point. I mean, what advantage is there to Britain that this is now a very salient international issue, the Elgin marbles, for Pete's sake, which, of course, is redolent of colonialism and imperialism and all the things we don't really want to discuss internationally.
It makes us look smaller on the world stage rather than bigger. So if Sunak was trying to sort of, play the big man, it's failed. I think it's opened up the question about these artefacts in all the museums now. I think Elgin marbles, I mean, we'll discuss, or you'll be discussing this later in the show. However, they should go home now. It is time, I think, for these to be reunited with the Parthenon. And you saw our king, of course, who is half Greek himself, wearing his Greek flag tie. I think a symbol that...
Did that bother you? Bothered me.
Did it? It didn't bother me at all. I think he was
political
basically...
intervention.
Well, was it? I mean, a very subtle one. But I think it is time for these things to go...
air raid.
I think these things should go home. And I think, everyone in the UK that has wanted to see the Elgin marbles probably has by now, let's face it. If you don't want to see them, you haven't done yet. So let them go back to Greece. Why not?
Joe, the Prime Minister was on to something at least when at COP28 he pointed out that Britain has done better than anyone else in reducing its emissions. Why is it that those who protest against the government and damage paintings and stick themselves to the pavements, by the way, in London, not in Tiananmen Square, why is it that they won't acknowledge how much Britain has already done?
Because Britain is rowing back, and under Rishi Sunak, we are seeing it, we're rowing back more quickly, if that's possible, than we were moving forward. I mean, we had David Cameron, previous Prime Minister, now Foreign Secretary, embracing green conservatism. We had Boris Johnson, who was quite committed to it for about 5 minutes. We've got Rishi Sunak, who's managed to really annoy a valued NATO member, and back to the subject of immigration, where Greece is a really key player in that whole debate and that discussion.
That's true.
So he's managed to do that, and within 24 hours manages to pop in to COP28 for less than a day.
Have you got £10,000 in your back pocket to change your boiler?
I haven't. But the point is, lots of people haven't, but we can't keep saying, we can't do it because no one can afford it. What you can do is to increase renewable energy. What you can do is to stop moving the goalposts so that businesses, motor manufacturers, companies, builders, planners have got a clear and consistent framework, if you like, for how to make Britain more sustainable and more environmentally friendly.
You make a very, very good point, but I think I would argue that the goalposts were probably put in a rather silly place in the first place, which is why they're having to be moved.
Well, they may be, but, Rishi Sunak is not doing anyone any favours, and I think the problem is, and as Charlie said, people aren't talking about the Elgin marbles, but they are now. People are looking at a man who is fabulously wealthy, not his fault, who's having, a heated swimming pool, and they're worrying about turning on the heating.
I'm going to stop you there. A marvellous panel discussion as ever. Joe Phillips, Paul Richards and Charlie Rowley. Thanks for coming on. We'll debate the ethical issues raised by the Elgin marbles at 12 noon. Stay with us for that. Before that, though, after this short break, Julian Lloyd-Webber speaks to Nicholas McCarthy, a classical pianist born without a right hand.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with you three.
Ah!
No, thank you.
I
CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this?
Are you rethinking this policy?
Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Over the past year, Julian Lloyd-Webber has travelled out to meet many talented musicians. None has faced a challenge as significant as Nicholas McCarthy's because he became a classical pianist despite being born with no right hand. Nicholas performs all over the world and has contributed enormously to the repertoire of piano music for the left hand alone. Julian caught up with him to hear his amazing story.
This morning has a wonderful, inspirational tale to tell. He first heard classical music when he was around 14 and instantly decided that he wanted to become a concert pianist. Well, it's a story that we've probably heard many times before, but this time there's a difference. Our guest was born without his right arm. Please meet Nicholas McCarthy.
Hi, Julian. Thank you for having me.
Well, it's a great pleasure. What obstacles did you encounter at the very beginning?
Well, like you say, deciding to be a concert pianist at the age of 14 and having one hand, full of teenage naivety, I feel at that time, and I'm very thankful for that teenage naivety because I think without that, I would have, instantly told myself, no, it's not possible, you can't do that, you can't become a concert pianist.
Yes.
I just had one of those epiphany moments watching my friend, who was an accomplished pianist, play in my school assembly, and it was just so wonderful and just everything kind of lit up in my mind.
And at that point you were at a state school in Surrey,
That's right.
And they had music, which is something, because if that hadn't happened, you wouldn't have had that. epiphany.
Definitely not. I definitely wouldn't have decided at that moment that's what I felt my purpose was. My purpose was to communicate and to communicate through music.
But in a way,
calling.
you know, 14 already quite late.
Yes.
But you obviously had a disadvantage. So how did you get into it?
I asked my mum and dad for a piano, expecting, you know, something like this, and of course, not getting that. I got a little keyboard, which I was still very pleased with. And I started kind of self-teaching, you know, listening to the, you know, the likes of you on the likes of Classic FM and people, just kind of being a bit of a sponge for music.
But so then a couple of years later, you approached a piano school.
Yes.
What was the reaction?
I had got quite good. I'd done a few of my early grades at the piano, and my teacher said, you know, I really feel you should apply for a specialist music school. And my friend who initially inspired me at the piano playing Beethoven, she went to a specialist music school. So in my head, perfect. I was going to go with her. It's going to be great. And unfortunately, when I rang the headmistress of this school to inquire about an audition for her to see me play, the phone call didn't go as I'd anticipated, and she basically said, you know, I haven't got time to see you. How can you possibly play scales with two hands? And I said, well, I can't. I've only got one hand, and I don't really want to play scales. I want to play music. And she hung up the phone. So for me, that was that real first negativity, that first knockback of someone, I suppose, having a prejudice,
slapping you down.
And it was hard.
She actually put the phone down on you.
She did.
That's incredible. Yes.
To be honest, I'm very thankful now that she did that, because it kind of gave me a bit of fire in my belly.
So then, next time, you approached the Guildhall School of Music, the junior department, yes, and what happened?
Well, I didn't tell them about my lack of a hand.
Clever.
I learnt the hard way the first time. And so I walked into the audition room and I had to explain about my lack of hand, slightly awkward conversation.
But you were in the room, I
was in the room, they couldn't escort me out. And I performed, and to my surprise, I was offered a place on one condition. I had to specialise in what's called left-hand alone repertoire, which, of course, starting at 14 and not having a background in classical music at all, I knew nothing of this left-hand alone repertoire. What is it? I didn't know anything about it.
Tell us about it now.
So left-hand repertoire started in the 19th century. Back then, concert pianists were like rock stars. And they used to kind of play a recital, I suppose, wherever they were. And in order to drive the crowd wild, they used to kind of, you know, say things like, you thought I was good with two hands, wait until you see what I could do with my weak hand. Most people's left hand is their weaker hand. So they'd play this big bravura piece with their weaker hand and, you know, blow the roof off of the house. Fast forward in time to the 20th century, and the First World War happened. And as we know, for the very same reasons, you know, most people are right-handed. So you're more likely in a war situation to lose or injure your right hand. So thousands of servicemen were coming back from battle with missing limbs, missing right arms, injured right arms. And one particular man, Paul Wittgenstein, part of the wealthy Wittgenstein family in Vienna, came back having lost his right arm. And he decided to use his position in society, his wealth, his connections, to commission the leading composers of the 20th century.
And he really did, didn't he?
He really did.
There's Ravel is the most famous one.
Prokofiev, Benjamin Britten, Korngold, Richard Strauss. So, you know, you name it, the hoi polloi of 20th century, Wittgenstein was there commissioning them to write for Left Hand Alone. And thankfully he did, because it gave me, the 21st century left-hand pianist, a huge repertoire.
You found over 3,000 and counting compositions for left hand alone.
That's right. I mean, it's astonishing how much repertoire there is. You know, 32 plus concertos and counting, 3,000 works, solo works for left hand alone and counting. And of course, I commission a lot myself nowadays as well. So it's always exciting to see this repertoire where most people think it's a limited repertoire. And I always think, well, you know, actually, it's a lifetime's worth of work, really.
It's tremendous. I mean, a tremendous repertoire. So tell us what's coming up. I think you've got a major London appearance. So, in fact, your debut recital soon.
That's right. I'm playing the Queen Elizabeth Hall at London South Bank on March the 23rd, which I'm so excited about. And as you know, it's a big date, and it's exciting and nerve-wracking.
Will there be some new pieces?
There is a new piece, a new commission by the film and TV composer Julie Cooper.
Great.
There's some Scriabin, there's some Bach Brahms.
Great.
There's some Strauss. So yeah, lots of wonderful pieces.
Play us something now.
This is a piece by Alexander Scriabin. It's his Nocturne, Opus 9, and he actually wrote this when he was 18 years old.
Yes.
He was in the Conservatoire with Rachmaninoff and Joseph Levine. Competitive class. I'd have hated to have been in that class. And they used to challenge each other to see who could learn fiendishly difficult pieces the quickest. So Scriabin, being a young competitive man, he decided that he would practice 10 hours a day, Julian, to beat his contemporaries. And he unfortunately contracted tendinitis in his right hand.
Lesson to be learned there
Lesson
somewhere.
to be learned, absolutely. Luckily for me, he, during that time, decided he's not going to, take it lying down. He will write the beautiful Prelude and Nocturne Opus 9, and this is the Nocturne.
That's Alexander Scriabin's beautiful nocturne for the piano left hand. You've also made quite a lot of arrangements of two-handed music for piano, just for left hand.
That's right. I mean, when I first started playing recitals, I kind of quickly found out that, you know, most people haven't heard a lot of left-hand alone repertoire. They may have heard the Ravel left-hand piano concerto, for instance. They might have heard the Scriabin nocturne, but they haven't heard a whole recital's worth of left-hand alone repertoire. So I found out that audiences are much more responsive to listening to unknown pieces that they've never heard before, if they kind of had something that they were slightly familiar with. So I started doing the odd arrangement here and there of kind of familiar pieces that they would have heard. And then I found that they were so much more, you know, open-eared when it came to other pieces that they certainly wouldn't have heard before.
But it must be just a massive challenge.
It's a challenge I enjoy. I mean, not every piece works for left hand, of course. And sometimes I might absolutely adore a piece of music, a, you know, two-handed piano piece, and think, oh, I wonder if that could work for left hand alone. And then I get to the piano, and of course it doesn't work at all. And then there's other times where I hear that and I think, oh, I wonder if that works. And it kind of works.
So you've recently got into playing concertos, and I think you've got a concert coming up next year with the Royal Philharmonic. And I guess the Ravel is the one that you will be asked for most.
Absolutely. I mean, I came to kind of concerto quite late, actually. I think everything with my career has been a bit topsy-turvy. And, you know, from your career, it's very, you know, in classical, you have quite a traditional path, usually. Yeah. And you might do a competition, and then you do a concerto, then you build your name that way. Whereas for me, that never happened. I was doing kind of lots of media stuff and recitals and building my own name kind of from that. And then the concerto stuff really came in the last few years. And of course, the Ravel left-hand concerto is one that I adore.
It's a beautiful, play us a bit.
It's, I mean, which bit, but my favourite part of the concerto.
It's just lovely music, but it's extraordinary to think that that would never have been written if Paul Wittgenstein hadn't lost his arm in the First World War.
Absolutely, and I'm always so grateful to Paul Wittgenstein for, you know, providing, and obviously the Ravel, and providing these absolute masterpieces. But it's so exciting, this kind of stage of my career, I suppose, because I've got this almost treasure trove of concertos, which I'm now learning, discovering, performing. And so it's a really exciting chapter, and one that I'm enjoying, of course, very much so.
Well, Nicholas, I think it's wonderful what you've achieved. It's an inspiration to us all, so thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Julian. Thank you.
Nicholas McCarthy there, playing for us and speaking to Julian Lloyd-Webber at the Amadeus in Maida. And that concert at the Queen Elizabeth Hall on the South Bank will be on March the 23rd, 2024. Stay with us, as Stefan Kyriazis will be here in a few minutes to review some of the most hotly anticipated theatre productions of the year.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with you three.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Wake up to the headlines with headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life: your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. The House of Bernarda Alba was the final play of the Spanish dramatist Federico García Lorca. He completed it just 2 months before being murdered by nationalists during the Spanish Civil War. The play is the tale of a tyrannical matriarch in 1930s rural Spain, and it's been brought to life once again at the National Theatre, and Stefan Kyriazis was there. And what did you make of it?
I made a lot of it, some up and down. So I think we've got some lovely images showing as well. So the first thing is the opening reveal. The stage opens like this, and it's dazzling. You have this incredible light green, minty set. Cross-section of a 3-storey house. The walls are all gauze, which is amazing, so you can see through them. It's light and bright. You have different scenes happening in different places.
Simultaneously.
Simultaneously, absolutely. And this is all wonderful, and also for me, kind of why it didn't work. Because the play is so much rooted in location. It's the south of Spain. Number one, heat. The play is all about heat. This is a very cool, chilly set, so it's more like a sanatorium, or gave me shades of prison, which I get because the matriarch incarcerates her daughters for 8 years of mourning, so they are trapped. But the heat oppresses and drains, and it also is stirring up anger and passions and lust. And at the same time, you know, the Spanish setting, the house, would have been heavy walls, bearing down on people, entombing them. So it kind of worked against, for me, what the kind of the themes of the play are.
That is very interesting. I have also seen the play. I was very impressed by the set. I think as we get into the last act, the denouement, where everything terrible is going to happen, we have to tell people that this is an unremittingly grim play. It starts badly and gets worse. But that is a very thrilling scene, because we can see that some of the women, there are 7 women involved, some of the women are going to bed, some of the women are asleep, some of them are up listening, some of them are plotting to go and meet their lover, and we're seeing this all the way through the house. And I thought the build-up to the last scene was really exciting. I had butterflies in my tummy. But although they every now and again remember to fan themselves, one didn't have much sense of the heat, and one didn't have much sense of Spain, actually, did one?
No, not at all. And this is very much because the play is also, it's Lorca's commentary on Spanish dictatorships, it's commentaries on patriarchy, on tradition, but you've got a hyper-modern set. So all of this was kind of taken away. And also, Alice Birch's translation is kind of resolutely, bracingly modern, and it's billed as after Lorca rather than translated from. So it's very free form. And again, bracingly modern, interesting, but it's littered with F-bombs, especially from Bernarda, and that really jars for me.
That jarred for me too. I didn't think that was at all what that character would have done. And, I mean, obviously, you've got to think that, you know, presumably people don't live like that today. This is how they lived in Spain nearly 100 years ago. And in Spain, nearly 100 years ago, they didn't use the F word within families. That's just not part of how it was. But quite recently, I went to the foundation of García Lorca in Granada, and I saw the manuscript. He wrote the play out by hand, and he finished it, and, you know, you can see his corrections, but actually it's very neat in his handwriting. And then he dates it, let me just think, he dates it the 22nd of June, 1936, and he is murdered on the 22nd of August. 1936. So exactly 2 months before his death. So, you know, naturally for me, I was very moved by that. I mean, I would still recommend people to go and see it.
I think it's an interesting concept. I possibly wouldn't. I think it's, for me, it frustrated me more than I could appreciate. It looked like it wanted to be admired. It was very over-stylized, but for me, it didn't allow me really to care. And very much, I felt, it starts with Bernarda demanding silence and ends with her almost pleading for silence. And to me, there were those moments, you said, especially when they were all in different rooms, but when they were doing nothing, just undressing or leaning out of a window, or you could just feel sorrow, desire, pain, loneliness. For me, when it was silent, those are the moments when the play, to be a bit cheeky, that's when it spoke to me. So, yes, it's a qualified enjoyment.
From a Spanish play to the Scottish play, Macbeth.
Yes, so Macbeth, but a very global-looking Macbeth. So again, they want it to be more than just the play itself. So I think we got a little clip of Ray Fiennes and Indira Varma talking about it.
These horrors may sound somehow romantic on stage, but of course they're terrifying and real, and they're happening now, and they're happening in the Ukraine, happening in Gaza, and sadly wars are always with us. So we thought that to give the audience a sense of the connection with the horror and the chaos and the destruction and the devastation that is the background to the beginning of the play and indeed continues through it, we were creating with our wonderful designer Frankie this set of blasted trees and a burning car and burnt out tyres and rusty blown up corrugated steel and bits of concrete and breeze block, and everything's just sort of blasted and rotten and burnt, and that's the atmosphere the audience will, that's what they feel when they come in.
It's sort of a vision of things that we've seen images of this on our TVs, and here it's been created.
Stefan, that didn't entirely sell it to me, but what's it like on stage? It's in Liverpool, by the way, isn't it?
It is, but it's touring. So we've got it, first of all, in Liverpool at the Depot until December 20th. Then it's moving to Edinburgh, 12th to 27th of January. Then down to London in the Docklands, February 10th to 23rd of March. And then it's going to Washington. So basically, what you saw behind them is possibly one of the most thrilling parts. So you walk through it, but it's all much more darkly lit. The car is actually burning. So you're walking through a war-destroyed area as you come in, and then you walk into this purpose-built auditorium, and then the stages behind you as you walk in through all of it. That part's amazing. And that part at the very, very end is then all revealed as the set pulls back, and you have light effects, you have the final battle, the wood coming towards him, all of this sort of stuff. It's thrillingly done. But the stage itself is very plain. It looks like a sort of wannabe North London trendy house. It's just kind of panels of wood. The costuming, again, which it was all part of, it's supposed to represent known people and dictators and sort of troublesome people around the world. But to me, Macbeth in his suit looked like a mid-level bank manager. They never looked regal. The witches were interesting, young girls. They looked like they're supposed to be from a war-torn country. To me, they look like they're about to chain themselves to a tree and protest eco-issues, lots of sort of raggy hair and Doc Martens. But the three girls were excellent and a little bit eerie. And
what about the Macbeth and the Lady Macbeth?
So it's very... It was billed as staged like never before. But actually, the staging is very traditional. The text interpretation is very traditional. And Fiennes, for me, gives a very classic Shakespearean delivery in terms that he speaks and then takes a pause before he delivers his final line. And there's lots of bitten off consonants at the end of every line. And it's very like this. So for me, it was a bit method. I know there's been lots of raves. He is a grand, glorious actor. For me, it just felt like Shakespeare acting. And Varma is great, but for me, after the Branagh disappointment, all we've got left now is David Tennant doing Macbeth at the Donmar later in December. So
that's something you're going to be looking forward to.
I hope.
I imagine that you can go online and get tickets tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow. Thank you very much indeed, Stefan Kyriazis. You're watching Michael Portillo on GB News, Britain's news channel. I'll be back in just a few minutes for the next hour of the programme, when I'll be asking where is the proper home for the Elgin marbles and what are the best English wines to drink this Christmas. Stay with us.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, welcome to your latest GB News weather. I'm Ellie Glazier. A much cloudier start compared to what we've seen recently across the southern half of the UK today, but further north, still a very cold and frosty start this morning. Low pressure still very much in charge, sitting out to the southwest, with various occlusions running their way eastwards across much of the UK through this afternoon. This will bring bands of rain and cloud and some showery rain as well across parts of England and Wales. Again, perhaps turning wintry over the hills of North Wales, parts of the Midlands and Northern England as well. But for Northern Ireland, Scotland definitely seeing the best of the sunshine this afternoon. Still feeling cold despite that sunshine, parts of Scotland perhaps staying below zero, but under all that cloud and rain, the southern half of the UK definitely milder than we've seen recently. Through Sunday evening, further rain pushes up from the southwest overnight and into the start of Monday. This likely to turn very heavy across the southern half of the UK. Parts of England and Wales seeing those accumulations build up into the start of the new working week. Further north, though, another cold night. Under any of those clear skies, we could see a risk of ice, with temperatures widely dropping down below freezing across Scotland and northern England, but milder again across the southwest. Into the new working week, rain very much in charge across parts of England and Wales, again turning wintry across the hills of Wales, northern England, where we could see up to 10 centimetres across the Pennines. A very damp day, though, for much of the southern half of the UK. Northern Ireland and Scotland, though, seeing plenty of sunshine, with some showers pushing in along those eastern coasts, but still feeling cold here with temperatures in the low single figures.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh! No, thank you. My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this?
Are you rethinking this policy?
Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello and welcome back to the second hour of Sunday with Michael Portillo. Season your Sunday afternoon with sprinklings of arts, culture and good debate. The Elgin marbles were perhaps more discussed in recent days than during any week since they were brought to Britain more than 200 years ago. Rishi Sunak cancelled a meeting with the Greek Prime Minister, who had called publicly for the masterpieces to be sent back to Athens. That restored the issue to international prominence. 4 academics will chisel away at the arguments for returning or retaining the ancient sculptures. Questions continue over the fate of Telegraph newspapers, as a fund backed by Abu Dhabi is poised to take ownership of the venerable British publication. 18 Conservative members of Parliament have written to the Culture Secretary to object. I'll speak to a commentator on that. Ridley Scott's latest epic on the life of Napoleon Bonaparte has enjoyed a reception from historians as icy as a Russian winter. They have pointed to its many inaccuracies. Professor Robert Toombs from the University of Cambridge, a specialist in French history, has given us his expert review of the movie. And as Christmas approaches, I'll be joined by author and wine columnist Henry Jeffries, who will recommend his favourite English wines for the Yuletide season. All of that to come. First, the headlines with Aaron Armstrong.
Very good afternoon to you. It is just after 12 o'clock. I'm Aaron Armstrong. Thousands of people in Cumbria could be without power until late tonight after heavy snow. Electricity North West says teams are struggling to reach sections of the damaged network. Around 2,500 customers are affected. Emergency services have also been working to help people who were trapped in their cars. A large number of vehicles were abandoned on the M6 overnight. Weather warnings for snow and ice remain in place for much of the UK. Senior meteorologist Jim Dale says milder conditions over the coming days, though, could lead to floods.
Give or take that area, sort of about a foot of snow, level snow. That if you melt that snow to an inch, tomorrow we got another system coming in, another system which has got low pressure attached to it. It's quite a tight thing, so there'll be wind, but also heavyweight rain as well. Now, all that snow down, and not just Monday, but on Wednesday as well, quite heavyweight rain. So all this snow and the rain attached to it that's coming, I think we might be looking at floods at midweek again.
A man's been killed and 2 people, including a British tourist, were injured in a knife and hammer attack in Paris. It happened near the Eiffel Tower last night in what the French president has described as a terrorist attack. A Officials have confirmed the man who died was a German tourist. A 26-year-old French national, known to security services, has been arrested. The suspect reportedly told police he was upset about Muslims dying in Gaza and Afghanistan. An extra £15 million will reportedly be given to Rwanda to take migrants who arrive in the UK illegally. That's on top of the £140 million already received. The Sunday Times says the additional funds aim to secure a treaty so the East African country also takes asylum seekers who cross the channel in small boats. 519 people were intercepted yesterday, bringing this year's total to just over 29,000. It's understood Foreign Secretary James Cleverly will fly to Kigali in the coming days to seal the new agreement. The UK will carry out surveillance flights over the Middle East to find hostages held by Hamas. More than 130 people are being held captive in Gaza, where fighting has resumed following a week-long truce. The Ministry of Defence says the unarmed flights will not have a combat role. Meanwhile, Israel continues to carry out intense airstrikes in southern Gaza. The Hamas-run health ministry says 7 Palestinians were killed and several others injured during a raid on Rafah city. The US is calling on Israel to avoid further harm to civilians in its fight against Hamas. The UK will give £100 million to vulnerable countries most affected by climate change. It will provide nations with early warning systems for extreme weather and will help tackle food and water shortages and a rise in infectious diseases. The government says global warming pushes 26 million people into poverty every year. International Development Minister Andrew Mitchell will announce the plans at the COP28 Climate Summit in Dubai later. Liz Truss is set to propose a law banning biological males from single-sex spaces. The former Prime Minister is also looking to prevent children from attempting to change their gender. The bill would also ban transgender women from accessing female toilets and changing rooms. It's due to be presented to the Commons on Wednesday. And more ongoing travel chaos as train drivers stage another day of strikes. ASLEF union members are staging a series of walkouts in a dispute over pay. Great Northern, Thameslink, Avanti West Coast trains have been cancelled. Chiltern Railways and West Midlands railway services are also affected. We are on TV, digital radio, on your smart speaker. Just say play GB News. That's it for the moment. Now back to Michael.
Thank you, Aaron Armstrong. The Elgin, or Parthenon marbles, have found themselves at the centre of national controversy this week, perhaps more than at any time since they were brought to Britain over 200 years ago. Rishi Sunak's snub to the Greek Prime Minister, who, like all his predecessors, demanded the return of the marbles during his trip to London, has reignited the debate over whether they should remain in the British Museum or be returned to Greece. The ancient Athenian sculptures were located at the Parthenon before being removed by Lord Elgin at the beginning of the 19th century and shipped to Britain. To answer whether the marbles should be retained or returned, I have with me an expert panel. In the studio, we have Dr. Nigel Spivey, a classicist at the University of Cambridge, as well as Michael Daly from Artwatch UK, and archaeologist Mario Tribuco de la Torreta. And joining me remotely is the A.G. Leventis Professor of Greek Culture, Paul Cartledge, also at the University of Cambridge. Actually, Paul, let's start with you down the line. I think you tend to make the case for returning the sculptures, do you not?
I do. I've done it for more than 40 years, Michael. Thank you, by the way, for having me on the programme. And I'm wearing a tie, which is made by the same company as the tie that the King was wearing the other day. This has letters of the Greek alphabet on it, as opposed to the Greek flag. Yes, I've campaigned for over 40 years, since the 1980s, since, in particular, Melina Mercouri's campaign. I'm an academic, as you know, so I have, if you like, a twofold interest. One is they are a set of sculptures, so it's, to me, very painful that they are divided. So it's one building, one set of architectural sculptures, one programme. And both aesthetically and historically, archaeologically, I feel they should be together. And there is a wonderful museum in Athens. The picture you're showing on the screen is of the Duveen Gallery, which is a rather poor display of only part, of course, of both the pediment, the metopes, and the frieze sculptures. So if I can put it in a nutshell, I have archaeological, art historical, aesthetic, cultural, because it's a matter of diplomacy, as well as, if you like, personal reasons for wanting them to be reunified. Thanks for asking me.
Paul, may I ask, are there any issues that might worry you? I mean, for example, some people talk about the pollution in Athens. Is that something that we ought to bear in mind? Can we believe now that they would be as well cared for in Athens as in London?
Yeah, in a word, yes. The pollution issue was very, very rampant not so long ago, which is why almost everything has had to be taken from the actual temple, what survives of it, into the new Acropolis Museum, where it's beautifully displayed. Pollution is one thing, earthquakes are another, but the museum has been specifically built in such a way as to combat even the highest grade of seismicity. So there's no need to worry about that. The actual staff of the Acropolis Museum and their equipment, lasers and other technical equipment, quite stunningly up to the minute. So there's no question of their not being well curated if they do and when they do go back. Whereas you probably know that there have been episodes in the past, not in the present, but in the BM where they weren't brilliantly curated, and the gallery is rather dingy. The sculptures are shown on the inside of a wall of a building rather than on the outside, and so on and so on. There are all sorts of reasons why they shouldn't be in London, in my humble opinion.
Thank you very much indeed, Paul. Let me turn to Michael Daly. We were just seeing there at the end, those were pictures of the new Acropolis Museum, and we could see the Parthenon through the glass windows. I must say I've been very impressed by that building. It has had an impact on my view of whether they should remain or return. What is your view, and has it been impacted by the new museum?
No, the new museum has served as a kind of weapon in the long-running debate over the future of the British Museum marbles, the Elgin marbles. The Greeks have been asking for the return of the Elgin marbles for a very long time. They were asking at a time when their own marbles on the Parthenon were rotting away, being eaten. I mean, not slightly, but ferociously. They had to be brought indoors. And the chief argument against Elgin's acquisition of the marbles, or really, properly speaking, his rescue of the marbles, because many of them were in the ground or on the floor or not tended to. The charge against Elgin was that this was an act of desecration of a temple and that it was wrong to take them down. Well, now they've been taken down, and the last speaker complains that the frieze carvings, the shallow relief frieze carvings in the British Museum are mounted against an interior wall. But as we saw, so they are in Athens. They're not put outside, they're not high up, they're stuck on a wall. And that's a very sensible way for museums to display them, because you can see them well.
Mike, let me put it to you. Perhaps we could all accept, maybe we can't, but let's for the moment accept that Elgin did a good thing and that the marbles have been better off in London for most of the last 200 years than they would have been if they'd been left out in the open in Athens. Let's accept that for the moment. But you're not arguing, are you, that today they wouldn't be properly treated in Athens, are you?
They probably will be better treated than they have been. They may be as well treated as standard music. One would expect that to be the case. But that isn't the whole story. The question is whether a museum which has held legal title of these carvings, and contrary to what's been suggested, has displayed them extremely well. I mean, the Duveen galleries, people sniff and say it's not Greek-like, which it isn't. It's a fabulous presentation of what are arguably some of the best sculptures in the world. And to lose the Duveen galleries would be a dreadful blow against the heart of the British Museum and against museum practice and scholarship. Bringing everything back together has a certain logic, but the cost of having the marbles removed from London at this stage, the precedent that would be set, the dangerous fueling of restitutionism, which is, to be honest, it's an ugly, divisive, often Philistine. It's not to be welcomed. Everybody, obviously, would like everything back to their own country, but the world is the world, and it's moved on. And Greek sculpture has moved on and been internationalised, partly through its display at the British Museum and the scholarship associated with it.
Nigel.
Michael.
I have a feeling you might want to retort to that. You might want to respond and maybe contradict some of that?
I'd want to modify the statement of the world moving on, because in museum terms we have moved on. Precedents have already been established for returning things that were palpably looted. And of course the issue with the Elgin marbles is that he was kind of doing what was done at the time. But even by those low standards, it was known and accepted that, he had permission to remove. It's an Italian phrase. Have we got time for a quick Italian lesson?
Yes.
Qualche pezzo di pietra. We have an Italian here. Mario.
Qualche pezzi.
A piece or two of stone. His Italian agents were up there doing things for him. And they were getting things for his ancestral home. Yeah. I agree that the marbles inadvertently they probably owe their lives, as it were, to Elgin's intervention. But to say that that's a reason for keeping them strikes me as bizarre. I'm someone who has twice been rescued from death by drowning, and it would seem to me odd to say to whoever had saved my life, you've got me, I'm yours. So, deaccessioning, it's a horrible word, but it's already happening. And, I feel a little bit queasy about this because...
I think Michael was making a point about the reach of the British Museum.
I know, and they call it encyclopedic, and I get that, and I want it in a way, because it's an enlightenment project.
And you can make an argument for them all being together in one place, but you can also make an argument for them being in London and being in a broader context.
Seen with other masterpieces.
Yes.
No, I absolutely get that. And as I say, a bit of me, feels a tinge of regret for that loss of that. But when you think about the original encyclopedia, it goes back to Roman imperial times, and it's Pliny basically creating, an encyclopedia of the world, and it's the world that belongs to Rome.
Yeah.
And I think there is a sense in which the British Museum, it doesn't want to be a museum of the imperial reach of Britain.
Yeah.
I don't think it does, and I think you'd find plenty of people within the museum who actually would realise that the time has come to follow suit and do what other museums are doing.
Well, Mario, I think I'm right in thinking that you're one of the people that actually believes the British Museum has lost its backbone, that too many people within the British Museum have given up on the idea of keeping them.
Absolutely, and I think that George Osborne is absolutely wrong in advocating for this phantomatic deal, which is also quite secretive. We don't even know what that entails, for how long, and under which terms, to actually repatriate part of these marbles. The point to me is that the British Museum is, apart from being an encyclopedic museum, and I accept that, but it's also a British museum. And this means that it is a museum of what it means to be British. All the things that are in the British Museum talk about us in a way or another. Particularly, the Elgin marbles are there telling the story of, first of all, our relationship with antiquity, our relationship with classical antiquity, not seen as idealized as it was before the Elgin marbles, but in its rugged reality, broken. And it's, in a way, it's even the start of scientific archaeology as we know it today. Then it's also a monument that has inspired art, British art, in the country and abroad. So it's a fundamental piece of the story that we tell ourselves about who we are and why we care about these things. And about this project was so important to a person like Lord Elgin that he upended his entire fortune. He put everything at stake, went all in, saying, it's worth it. We should do something. Yes. And I'm doing it.
Is it not a little self-indulgent of the British to say, this tells our story, and that is a more important reason than taking them back to the place from which they came, where they're in the context of what was intended by the craftsmen and the architects who put them up?
Absolutely. I don't buy that point for one particular reason. First of all, the Parthenon sculptures are not a unique case. Despite whatever the restitutionists are trying to say, especially Paul Cartledge, we are seeing monuments that are divided all over the place. There's politics coming from Italian museums and Italian churches that are scattered in 17 different museums in the world. There is the obelisk in Place de la Concorde in Paris that comes from the temple of Thutmosis III in Luxor. Should we give it back as well? There is the Serpentine column in the Hippodrome in Istanbul that comes from the sanctuary of Delphi. So all this is history, as Michael was saying. This is the way the world was, and this the way is denying these and saying, you know what, it should have been different. Therefore, I just go there and make it different. This is patronizing. This is us going basically in another country, in another milieu, that is, and saying, you know what, you were wrong, I'm right, I'm doing whatever you should have done. And this is absolutely anti-cultural.
Let me go back to Paul Cartledge. Paul, you've been listening to the argument. Can I just broaden it and ask for quite a brief answer? To what extent are you worried about where this process will end? The idea that things should go back from museums where they are today to their place of origin. Are you worried about the broad application of that principle?
Yes, in principle. And I share Mario's concern. I basically disagree with a lot of what he says, of course. One thing I disagree with is the nature of the reunification and therefore the nature of the uniqueness of this particular case. It's not because they're in different places that I think they should come together. It's because there is a building, what remains of the original building, still on the Acropolis. And Michael, you've already really made my case in that regard already. Nigel's made my case in other regards. That's talking about Elgin. Perhaps I should just add, which I hope will clear up a very widespread confusion. The Greek government has always only asked for the marbles that have come from or been taken or been stolen from the Parthenon. The Elgin marbles in the British Museum, the collection which the British government bought and which correctly, in British law, legally owns for the nation, and the trustees of the British Museum hold them in trust for the nation. Those are a much wider collection. I'll give you just one illustration because it's a very pertinent one. There is a caryatid which had to be sawed out of the temple on the Acropolis in the British Museum. The Greek government has never asked for that back. It's only asking ever for the Parthenon marbles. So when you asked me to come on this program, you asked me to come on to a program about the Parthenon sculptures. Completely right. So we're actually not talking about the Elgin marbles, which is a much wider concept. So why do I say that the case is unique and therefore doesn't have any implications whatsoever for any other artifact? In the 8 million collection of the British Museum, it is because of that building up on the top of the Acropolis, a shell destroyed by human agency, by natural agency over thousands of years. But nevertheless, that is the reference point, the cultural center, the beating heart of Hellenism, a form of democracy, And why I most of all want the British Museum trustees and then the British government to give them back is cultural diplomacy. I'm deeply distressed by the way relations between Greece and Britain have been soured this week because of the marbles. That's the last thing the marbles should do. I won't go on, but I'm personally deeply upset by the diplomatic rift at a time when the world has gone to hell in a handcart. Europe is being attacked by Russia. We absolutely must be solidary with our European partners.
Paul, thank you very much. Gentlemen, I want to thank you all for what I found a really interesting discussion. Thank you for coming on and putting your different points of view. Particularly pleased that you came in on a Sunday lunchtime. So I'm thanking Dr. Nigel Spivey, Professor Paul Cartledge, Michael Daly, and Mario Trabucco de la Torreta.
Thank you.
After the break, we'll be looking at the proposed takeover of the Daily Telegraph newspaper by a fund backed by Abu Dhabi. Stay with us.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Ah!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only three people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this?
Are you rethinking this policy?
Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. A series of complex business transactions could result in the takeover of Telegraph newspapers and The Spectator by a fund tied to Abu Dhabi and the Emirati royal family. The Culture Secretary, Lucy Fraser, on Thursday issued a public interest intervention notice into Redbird IMI's prospective ownership of the group. A number of Conservative MPs has been urging the government to intervene. Let's hear some of the details from Henry Hill of the website Conservative Home. Henry, welcome back. Should we be worried about the ownership of the Telegraph and the Spectator by funds linked to Abu Dhabi and to the Abu Dhabi state?
It is certainly something that the government should be looking at. What this comes down to is effectively, to what extent does Abu Dhabi have an active controlling interest? So Redbird IMI is an alliance, if you like, between Redbird, which is an American fund, and IMI, which is the Abu Dhabi Foreign Investment Fund. Now, they claim that Abu Dhabi is going to be a silent partner and that all of the leadership is going to come from the Americans. The president of Redbird is a former CNN chief executive. And, of course, we've had American media owners in the United Kingdom before, and they've been controversial in their turn. But can they be trusted on that? How can we guarantee that? Because obviously Abu Dhabi has a very different culture when it comes to press regulation and press freedom, and indeed an awful lot of other political things than does the United Kingdom. Now, apparently there is evidence from the United States, I have not seen it, but there's chatter that there is evidence from the United States that actually IMI is actually a much larger has much more controlling influence over the Redbird alliance than
IMI being the Abu Dhabi bit,
International Media Investments. That's the Abu Dhabi branch, and then Redbird is an American sovereign wealth.
I mean, yes, presumably there will be assurances, but how can we trust these assurances? How on earth could these assurances be guaranteed?
It's an interesting question whenever it comes to press regulation, because of course when Rupert Murdoch bought the Times newspapers, he offered a guarantee of editorial independence, which was one of the ways that Margaret Thatcher managed to help get that through. And he more or less respected that. But, you know, there are people who would say that he did have an obvious an influence over the papers. And I think actually the burden of proof should be on IMI. It should be for them to demonstrate clearly and decisively that they are purely silent financial partners, and there should be some kind of remedy mechanism in place if that's found to not be the case. I don't think we're obliged to give them the benefit of the doubt. You know, the UK generally has a pretty lax view of foreign ownership, but you do need to take a decision. It's one thing having America, which is, for all its many faults, like an ally and a Western democracy and a Gulf monarchy.
The sale is being organised by Lloyds Bank, and the reason for that is that the Barclay brothers, who owned the Telegraph, had a £600 million debt which was called in by the bank. And the deal that's being offered by Redbird IMI is that they will pay off that debt for the Barclay brothers, and then they'll put some more money in and acquire the title. Does this raise some questions as to whether there's fair competition for the purchase?
It is absolutely short-circuiting the bidding process. So normally what would happen is that the papers, the media group would be put out to tender. It includes not just the Telegraph, but the Spectator magazine, as you say, and then people would bid, and the bids would be assessed. And what's actually happening is that effectively Redbird IMI is extending the Barclays a loan to the value of the group, as they put it, which is 600 million, and then with the option of redeeming that debt for control of the company instead of the Barclays having to pay it back. Now, that does, as you say, completely short-circuit the bidding process. It is legal. It's financially legal. It is a way for the Barclays to resolve their debts. They have a deadline with Lloyds, which cannot be hit with a full tender process. So that's why they're doing it, potentially. But yes, from a competition standpoint, it is deeply suboptimal.
David Davis was on earlier with Camilla, and he was saying, here's an example, there's a Conservative leadership contest being run. The Telegraph and the Spectator would both be very influential voices during such a leadership contest. We cannot possibly have those titles in the hands of a foreign state.
It's an interesting argument. The IMI is linked to a foreign state, and therefore it does potentially raise questions about foreign ownership that a normal buyout from a normal sovereign wealth fund wouldn't. But the United Kingdom typically does take a very, very lax approach towards foreign buyouts of football clubs, national companies and everything else. Now, that's very recently started to change. We've seen with the National Security and Investment Act that actually finally the government is starting to take a more active view about whether or not foreign funds and companies linked to foreign governments, specifically China normally, should be allowed to buy national assets. It would make sense, I think, to include the press in that kind of scrutiny relationship, but that does not involve necessarily prejudging any individual sale. Because, of course, the other question is the Barclays have until, I think, sometime in early December to make this deal with Lloyds. You could not organise a competitive tender in that time. So they do have a right to dispose of their assets in such a way as to stop them going bankrupt. So how do we get round, how do you square that circle, I think, is an interesting question.
It is an interesting question indeed. So it's going to come to a head very, very quickly. Thank you very much, Henry Hill from Conservative Home. After the break, historian of France, Professor Robert Toombs, gives his review of Ridley Scott's latest blockbuster, Napoleon. First, though, your news headlines with Aaron Armstrong.
It's 12:32. Very good afternoon to you from the GB newsroom. 2,500 people are without power in Cumbria. Snow and ice continue to cause problems in the county. Electricity North West says they're struggling to reach sections of the damaged network. Warning services may not be restored until later tonight. Emergency teams also work to help people trapped in their cars, with a large number of vehicles abandoned on the M6 overnight. A man's been killed and 2 people, including a British tourist, were injured in a knife and hammer attack in Paris. It happened near the Eiffel Tower last night in what the French president has described as a terrorist attack. Officials have confirmed the man who died was a German tourist. A 26-year-old French national known to security services has been arrested. An extra £15 million will reportedly be given to Rwanda as part of the Stop the Boats Treaty. That's on top of the £140 million already received from the UK to take asylum seekers. The Sunday Times says the government's trying to secure a deal which will see migrants who cross the Channel illegally also being sent to the East African country. The UK will carry out surveillance flights over Israel and Gaza to search for hostage sites used by Hamas. Fighting resumed on Friday after a week-long pause, during which 80 Israeli hostages were released in exchange for 240 Palestinian prisoners. More than 130 people, though, remain in captivity in Gaza. The Ministry of Defence says the unarmed flights will not have a combat role. Well, I'll have more at the top of the next hour, or you can get more right now on our website, gbnews.com. Now, it's back to Michael.
Thank you, Aaron Armstrong. If history is a set of lies agreed upon, as Napoleon once said, then perhaps we shouldn't be too surprised by the latest depiction of him by film director Ridley Scott, whose epic on the life of France's greatest military leader has been denounced by historians for its inaccuracies. Earlier, Professor Robert Toombs, author of many books on French history, gave GB News his thoughts on the blockbuster movie.
Well, Professor Toombs, what did you make of Ridley Scott's film of Napoleon?
Well, I was rather disappointed by it, and I thought it was really rather dull. I thought he managed to make Napoleon a rather boring character, which, whatever else he was, I don't think he was that.
Does it really matter whether there are inaccuracies in a film's portrayal of an historic figure?
Well, in a way, not. I mean, I'm a historian, therefore I'm prejudiced in the sense that I tend to think that the real story is usually more interesting than the fake story, and I think this film shows that very clearly. I mean, it's a funny thing about film directors, and I think Ridley Scott is clearly one of those, that they're obsessed with getting minor details right. You know, you can be quite sure that the uniforms, the buttons, the tableware, and all that is exact, but they don't sort of care about the rest. And so a lot of things for me, and I think for anyone who knows anything about this subject, would find it strange or very hard to believe in these characters. I mean, for one thing, they're nearly all much too old. The actors chosen are usually a whole generation older than the people they portray. You know, the actor who plays Napoleon is roughly the age that Napoleon was when he died. When Napoleon became emperor, he was only 34. When Robespierre was guillotined, he was only 36. You know, revolution and war is a young man's game, and everybody here seemed to me, apart from Josephine, who's too young, was really much too old. Wellington at Waterloo was 45, not in his 60s. And I think that made the whole thing just much duller than it would have been had it been closer to the reality.
Joaquin Phoenix's portrayal of Napoleon Bonaparte is pretty clownish. Is there any merit in that depiction?
Well, Napoleon was a rather strange character. There's no doubt about that. So I think there was plenty about him that we would find odd. But then, you know, he was also highly intelligent. He was a great multitasker. He was charismatic. He must have been. He couldn't have done what he did without a lot more in him than I think this film possibly shows. There may have been a slightly clownish character to him, or at least an oddity about him. But you know, he impressed a huge number of people, and people who were very intelligent and very perceptive. So, you know, you can't sort of write him off as just a clownish character. It seemed to me, at least in seeing this film, you would think, if you didn't know anything about the real Napoleon, you'd say, how on earth could this man have done the things he did? How on earth could he have persuaded people to follow him? What exactly has he done that justifies the fact that he was acclaimed emperor? And I think there's nothing here that shows the, as it were, the substance of Napoleon, the character, either his attractive side, which he had, or his demonic side, which he also had.
What is this costume you have on?
This is my uniform. I led the French victory at Toulon.
What is your name?
Napoleon.
As the course of my life just changed.
What about the relationship with Josephine, which supposedly was pretty tempestuous? How did the movie do in portraying that, do you think?
First of all, I found it very difficult to see what each would have seen in the other as they're portrayed here. And of course, one of the main things about their relationship is that Josephine was older than Napoleon. When they met, he was in his 20s. She was a very experienced woman in her mid-30s. He was a young man from the provinces who didn't know anybody, who'd led a very sheltered life in a bedsit, trying to write novels. And, you know, the attraction, obviously, of her to him was that she could introduce him to the great sophisticated world. The older woman, you know, if you want a kind of mother substitute, perhaps. But anyway, an older woman, sophisticated, who knows all the right people. And his attraction to her was he was a young man on the make. Whereas that, I don't think those things really come out of this film at all. And yet that surely is what their relationship was really about.
Professor Toombs, if you can for a moment, set aside the fact that you are an historian, would you recommend the film for a wet Saturday afternoon?
No.
Professor Robert Toombs there, giving his review of Napoleon, the Ridley Scott film. After the break, I'll be joined by Henry Jeffries, author and wine columnist, who will recommend the best English wines for the festive season. So stay with us.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Ah!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox,
That's right, we want to hear from you,
GB News.
Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this?
Are you rethinking this policy?
Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. For our Taste of Britain this week, I have with me Henry Jeffries. He's a wine columnist and author of Vines in a Cold Climate, the people behind the English wine revolution. He's especially welcome as he's brought 3 bottles of English wine to make our Christmas go with a pop. Very nice to see you. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me on.
Let's just reference your book for a moment. There has been an English wine revolution, hasn't there?
There has. Since the 90s, when English wine was thought of as a joke, there's now champagne companies investing in Kent, Californian wine producers investing all over the country. So there's been a total change in how English wine is perceived. And the taste of it as well. It's got a lot better.
Yes. Tell us about the quality, and is it really related to global warming?
It's partly global warming. The summers get a lot hotter, so it's easier to ripen grapes. But also there's a new professionalism about the industry. So there's a school called Plumpton down near Brighton where they train winemakers. You have consultants coming over from France. And to be honest, there's a lot more money about. And to make really good sparkling wine, you need a lot of investment. So it's climate, training and money that have transformed English wine.
Actually, I've noticed that to buy English sparkling wine, you need quite a lot of money. It's not cheap.
No,
I'm not saying for a moment that it should be cheap, but let's get into this conversation. What's the first wine you might...
So we've got Ridgeview Cavendish. So Ridgeview are one of the pioneers of English sparkling wine. So along with Nightingale, they pretty much invented English sparkling wine made in the sort of model of champagne.
Where are they?
They're based in Sussex, and they're a family business, the Roberts family, and they make everything from sort of £20 fizz up to £90 fizz, like really, really fancy, that will give the best champagne a run for its money. So this is a non-vintage blend, so if you pass me one of your glasses. So this is a blend of vintages, blend of grapes, Pinot Noir, Chardonnay and Pinot Meunier. It's made using the champagne method, which involves making wine, adding a bit of sugar to it and then leaving it for a while, leaving it for 18 months, 3 years, something like that, and it develops. This is why it's so expensive, because you have to keep the wine for a long time.
Well, how expensive is this one?
About £30 a bottle. I think
£30.
Yeah.
That's not too bad. So about the price of a very cheap champagne.
Yeah, about the price. It's a little bit cheaper than your kind of Moet, Veuve Clicquot, that sort of stuff, but not as cheap as the cheapest champagne. And I think,
do you think we're getting better value from this
than
from a cheap champagne?
I think once you're paying more than £25 for English sparkling wine, so you have a little smell. It's got a high percentage of Pinot Noir in it, so you get a little sort of cherryish, strawberry thing on the nose. It's a dark grape. You should get lovely sort of toasty notes, and then have a little sip. Or a big sip. Lovely fine bubbles, like a good champagne. Beautiful fruit, quite high acidity, but it's balanced by that fruit. And then you get like a little bit of biscuity, kind of brioche-y thing at the end.
And this is the point, isn't it, that you're balancing the acidity and the sugar?
That's exactly it, yeah. Because previously,
The acidity was just out of control in English wines because the grapes didn't get ripe enough. But if you put it through the champagne process, it softens the acidity, balances it with toasty sort of notes, and I think it's rather good.
It's very good.
Yeah.
Why have you brought two sparkling wines?
Well, I thought I'd bring a rosé as well, because rosé is quite
What a lovely idea.
And festive. So this is produced in Kent, actually quite near where I live, by a chap called Richard Balfour Lynn, and his favourite wine was Bilcar Salmon Rosé, which is very expensive. And he thought, I'm going to make England's answer to Bilcar Salmon Rosé. So a very pale, elegant rosé. It's made by adding a tiny bit of red wine.
I'm doing this because at first I was doubting whether it was pink at all, but it is.
It's that very modern, kind of fashionable pale pink, you know, like you get in a Provence rosé. And I think it's rather good. Have a little smell.
So his intention was, he was inspired by the Bilcar Salmon.
Yeah.
And was he actually trying to emulate it, or was it just steering him in that direction?
No, I think he wanted to emulate it. I think he'd made a lot of money in hotels. He's the chap behind Malmaison Hotels. He had a country estate, and he thought, I want to make something as good as Bilcar Salmon Rosé.
That is absolutely delicious. What are we talking about for this, do you think? What was his satisfaction?
This is not expensive. This is about £25 a bottle, I think, at Majestic, if you buy more than one bottle. They do a lot more expensive wines, but this is their sort of great for Christmas Day kind of wine.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. Now, we've been talking about English, and before people start emailing us and saying we should be talking about British, I mean, these are all from England.
There are.
Is there any production in Wales or Scotland?
There's some lovely wines in South Wales. There's two really good producers. I didn't do Wales just because there's too many producers in England, so I sort of cut it down to England. I think there is like one person growing grapes in the borders in Scotland. I've never tried the wines. I think it seems like a tough thing to do. But, you know, global warming, you know, you might get a coat to Edinburgh at some point.
I've certainly had sparkling wines from, let me see, from Cambridgeshire.
Yes.
So, I mean, presumably this is spreading northwards.
It is spreading northwards, yeah. And
now, is it trickier to make a still wine in England than a sparkling wine?
It is, because...
So what have you got for us there?
So this is quite fun. I'm very pleased that we managed to get hold of some of this. So this is Lyme Bay, who are based in Devon. But for their best still wines, they buy grapes from Essex. And Essex is the driest place in the country, and also one of the warmest places in the country, near Chelmsford. So it means you can leave the grapes out on the vine for longer. So I think this is 2021. They were harvesting on Guy Fawkes Night.
Right.
So they can leave, whereas in other parts of the country it's damper, they'll rot, they'll get mould. In Essex it's really dry, so you can leave them out, get them ripe, really, really ripe. And with a wine like this, there's nowhere to hide. You don't add any sugar, you don't leave it to mature. It's just, the grapes have to be perfect or it's not going to taste very good. So let's hope this tastes good.
You've tried it before?
I haven't tried this vintage before, cheers, but I've tried... I think it's lovely. It's like a sort of Chablis style, and there's a lovely kind of creaminess to it. When you smell it, you get a sort of creamy, sort of toastiness, and that's oak aging, a little bit of lees stirring, those are the dead yeast cells, and that helps to fill out the palate, and you get something... I mean, you'd never guess that was English.
No, you would not. And would we do better if we went even to an earlier vintage, or...?
2020 was an absolutely stunning vintage. I think this is different, but equally good.
So give me the big picture now. How well are English wines doing? Are they becoming serious contenders?
I think they are, yeah. Especially the sparkling wines have been very, very good for 20 years, and I don't think anyone would argue with that. The still wines are coming on incredibly quickly. So even since 2018, 2020, the quality has just expanded. Like, for example, where the grapes are grown here, a Californian wine company has bought acres to make Essex Chardonnay. So Californians coming to Essex to make wine. I mean, you couldn't have predicted that 30 years ago.
No, it's quite a tribute, isn't it? Hello, Dawn.
Creeping up behind you.
Yes, you kind of took me by surprise there. So Dawn Neeson has come into the studio. We've got a glass there. What can we offer you?
Funny enough, yes, exactly.
Have some of the pink fizz.
Yes, we invite you for
anything
that.
fizzy, yeah. No,
we enjoyed all of these.
I've just been asked 3 times outside. It's like, Would you like to try a wine test? People are asking whether you'd like to try wine tasting. Thank you very much. That actually goes deliciously with your jacket.
Camilla slapped me down earlier because she doesn't drink, actually, so my offer to her fell on
no, she doesn't,
on deaf ears.
Yeah, no, I kind of make up, but I definitely drink.
So. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what's on your programme, which is coming on in a moment?
Oh, you want to do some work as well?
I thought so.
Oh, right, OK. Oh, God, you've got timing, haven't you? We've got a cracking show coming up, absolutely. I've got two brilliant guests. I've got Aaron Bastani and David Curtin, who agree on nothing. You know, even saying good afternoon, one of them will go, what's good? What's afternoon about it? So that. We've got lots of stuff coming up. We've got, obviously, the horrible news from Paris with the terror attack coming up. We're talking to some people about, could it happen here? You know, with the run-up to Christmas, Winter Wonderland, etc. Are we a threat here as well? So, but we've also got some fun stuff. Jungle. I bet you're glued to it, aren't you?
I have not been glued to it, but...
oh, come on, at least lie. At least lie.
How do you think our man Nigel is doing?
I think he's doing all right, do you? Well, you haven't watched it, though, so you don't know. Would you do it, though? No,
absolutely not. No, I have been offered. I wasn't offered $1.5 million,
no,
but I was offered.
Would you do it for $1.5 million?
No, no.
Come on, everyone's got a price.
No, I live I live a contented life.
What about Strictly Come Dancing?
No, least of all. I'd rather go in the jungle than Strictly, I think.
Oh, Bake Off?
No, certainly not that. Henry, I just want to give one more plug for your book. Henry Jeffrey's book is Wines in a Cold Climate, and thank you very much for bringing these in today, and they are absolutely delicious. That's it from me. I'll be back next Sunday as we continue the countdown to Christmas. Have a wonderful weekend. Bye-bye.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, welcome to your latest GB News weather. I'm Ellie Glazier. It's been a cloudier and wetter day across the southern half of the UK, a bit of a change to what we've seen recently. This is all due to an area of low pressure situated out towards the southwest, slowly moving its way towards us through the rest of today and into tomorrow. This will bring outbreaks of showery rain and cloud and a larger area of band of rain pushing its way up from the southwest overnight tonight and into tomorrow morning. There's likely to bring some quite heavy rainfall totals, particularly to parts of southwest England and South Wales as well, and could turn wintry across the hills of Wales, the Midlands and into parts of northern England through Monday morning. A drier but colder night again across parts of Northern Ireland and Scotland, perhaps dropping down to -5 or -6. A milder start across the southwest, though, particularly under all that cloud and rain, and it will slowly continue to spread its way north and eastwards as we head through the day on Monday, perhaps causing some disruption during the morning rush hour. A drier and brighter day again across Northern Ireland, parts of western Scotland, where there'll be plenty of sunshine through the afternoon, but some showers pushing in along those eastern coasts of Scotland. Another cold day across the north, temperatures in the low single figures, but milder again across the southwest under all that cloud and rain. Tuesday starts another cloudy and damp picture for much of England and Wales, but rain, hail, snow and sleet slowly clears its way south and eastwards through the day. That will lead to a drier and brighter day for most of us on Wednesday, but colder. However, later in the week, further wet and windy weather arrives, but turning milder for all.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News. Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.